What rules were created just because of you? I always liked Amazon.com, but sometimes I just wanted it to be faster, like Google. So I put together a PHP search engine that mimicked Google's style, but displayed Amazon products instead. Then I bought Wamazon.com and launched it. I kind of forgot about it and went back to my life. Fast forward a few weeks, the site's traffic exploded and I started earning hundreds a day in commissions. I began weighing the pros and cons of leaving college to become the next internet success story. Somehow, Google preferred Wamazon over the real Amazon site. About 8 weeks later, Amazon took notice and sent me a polite cease and desist letter. By then, they owed me just shy of $26,000 in referral fees. I used the money to pay for the rest of my years at college and start a small web consulting business, which I still run today. Amazon ended up changing their API terms of service to specifically prohibit API users from having a domain name that infringes on the Amazon trademark or includes the word Amazon.
Does your shop have a no delivery list? What houses are on it and why? We used to have houses in areas where we didn't offer delivery service. There was one area right in the middle of our usual delivery zone that we couldn't deliver to. But when a new manager came in, he was determined to increase our numbers. So he promptly made that area an official delivery zone. The first time, he handed me an order for that complex. I explained that it was complex and we didn't go there for a reason. He accused me of being racist because I didn't want to deliver to the complex. I was white, the manager was black, and said just to deliver it and quit complaining. Okay, man. So I drive it out there and walk upstairs to the apartment door. I knock. I look a bit closer and it is obviously a vacant apartment. So I head back to my car, and when I glance up in the rearview mirror, I see 3 bad-looking dudes crossing the parking lot heading right for my car. I notice one of them is carrying a rifle. I revved up my Volkswagen Rabbit, shifted into reverse, and sped out of the parking lot. When I returned to the shop, the new manager accused me of fabricating the story and doubted that I had actually tried to make the delivery. I told him to come with me to prove it. He agreed. We drove back to the location. He took the pizza up the stairs, only to discover it was an empty apartment. He quickly returned to the car, admitting, "My bad, you were telling the truth. It was a setup." He then restricted the area once again. Whole class cheated, and I think I'm the only one that got away with it. My whole class cheated, and I think I'm the only one that got away with it. One time in college, one of my older professors accidentally stapled answer sheets to the back of every test. A few minutes after all the tests were handed out, the teacher took a phone call and stepped outside. At that point, everyone noticed the answer sheet, and we decided to keep quiet and just tear it off when we were done. All the questions were multiple choice answers, except the last one that said, "Answers will vary." Once I was done with the test, I went to the podium to turn it in, but I was curious about what other people wrote for the last question, so I decided to discreetly take a look at some of them. I kid you not, all of the tests I looked at literally said, "Answers will vary," as their actual answers. I stood there frozen for a second, not believing college kids could be so stupid. Anyways, I passed my test and was never called back. I didn't know anybody in that class, and this was my last test before I graduated, so I never found out if they got caught or not. What is the most awkward thing you've seen a student do? I had a 7th grade girl raise her hand and ask me to come to her desk. When I leaned over, she asked quietly if she could go to the bathroom and gestured at her lap and muttered something I didn't hear. Assuming that she started her period and was fortunately in dark black pants, I let her leave, of course. When she comes back, she stands next to her chair for the rest of the lecture and leaves quietly at the bell. Next class comes in, and while I'm straightening up and standing in the hallway, the student who was assigned the same seat as that girl grabs some paper towels and starts cleaning up. There is a huge puddle in the chair and on the floor. It suddenly occurs to me, the dense teacher, that this poor girl had peed her pants in 7th grade. I told the boy that someone spilled their tea or water and tried to get him to stop cleaning it up, but he was like, "Nope, already done." He had just mopped up some girl's pee. I told him to wash his hands in case the tea was sticky and let it go. The boy never realized what it really was. I asked the girl the next day if everything was okay. She was so amazed that nobody even noticed. Thank goodness for unobservant teachers and students that day. But watching that boy clean up pee has haunted me. He was almost done when I realized what was going on, but still. What's the biggest lie you were told as a child? When I was 12, I was sent upstairs and told not to come down the rest of the night. A week later, my dad moved out of state for an amazing job where he would make 6 figures and send us a lot of money. Months later, he stopped calling me. It broke my heart, but I knew Dad was busy and didn't have time to call. Weeks later, things like jewelry started disappearing, but I never figured out why. My mom started not eating some days because she was fasting. On my birthday, she took me to Pizza Express, but again, she wasn't hungry. I'm now 19, and it turns out my dad lied to me and was in so much debt that the police came to our house to arrest him, so they sent me to my room. This 6-figure job was him fleeing the country and leaving my mom with his debt. So my mom started pawning her jewelry, and we were so poor, she starved some days just to feed me. The Pizza Express was her using a voucher that got me pizza for $8. And although she was under a lot of stress and starving, she had free tap water. I can't believe how my mom got through this while giving me lovely memories of laughing at dinner and taking me to the park. Ever convinced your friend to ask out their crush? My best friend was a huge introvert and had a massive crush on a girl from one of his classes. He would constantly talk about her and ask me for advice on how to finally approach her. One fateful night, I simply just told him to go for it and said, the worst she can tell you is no. A few days later, my best friend saw his crush walking towards us down one of the hallways by herself. I looked over to see his reaction and saw him take a deep breath and say, "Wish me luck," and walked over to meet her. I watched as they talked and his face started going beet red. He was so nervous he wasn't really making eye contact and his hands were doing all sorts of things. Just then, I also noticed she had this smile on her face, looking him up and down. Then came the moment of truth. I watched as he pulled his phone out and handed it to her. She took it and then gave it back, rubbed his hand, and as she walked off, I could hear her giggling. He walked back to me with a swagger I'd never seen in him before. I got her number! I felt so proud. And the best part is, 8 years and 3 kids later, they're still going strong. I was the best man at their wedding. What's the nicest thing you've seen a gang do? My mom was a 6th grade teacher in the roughest part of Compton. In one of her classes, she had a group of guys who she knew all came from very poor families. During lunch break, they always drew pictures of fancy exotic cars. My mom would always tell them how good they were, and they all promised that she would be the first person they would take for a ride if they ever got a car. Many years later, on a random day, my mom was going home after finishing teaching for the day. She was walking to her car when she saw a shady group of guys all leaned up against a car staring at her. She was nervous, so she tried to ignore them, but as she got to her car, she noticed all of them walking up to her. She could see all of them were visibly dressed, part of a gang, and had weapons. One of the guys said, "Mrs., we're here to take you for a ride." She was terrified of being kidnapped, so she went to grab her pepper spray. Just as she did this, one of the guys calmed her down and said they were the 5 boys she taught years ago. After that, they took her to a really fancy restaurant in their Cadillac and paid for her meal. Teachers, what's the best thing a student has ever said? One year while teaching 8th grade, I had this really shy kid, along with one of those stereotypical mean girls in one of my classes. The girl would always be begging for attention, blurting out stuff like, "You're probably my second least favorite teacher," and would make fun of a lot of the other girls. It bothered me when she would make fun of the shy kid because he reminded me of myself. One day I was doing a group project and decided to pair the two, along with 2 other boys. After a while, I noticed that the girl wasn't doing any work and was just talking with the 2 guys, leaving all the work for the shy kid. I walked over and asked why he was doing all the work, and the mean girl told me he was hogging all the work and not letting them do any. I knew this wasn't true, so I said that they could just do the rest since he did most of it already. The girl said, "No, it's okay, he can do it, he's a nerd anyways," and got a laugh out of the boys. I then said to her, "You should be nice to him, he could be your boss one day." Just after this, with zero hesitation, the shy kid finally spoke. He said, "No thanks, I don't want to be a pimp when I grow up." First responders, when a kid calls 911 as a prank, what do? I'm not a police officer, but I did something far worse. I called 911 and told them we need firemen at our apartment because my neighbor's house was on fire, only because the neighbor was getting on my nerves. I was only 9 when I did this. About 5 minutes later, 3 fire trucks raced up to our street and started evacuating people. This made me smirk. Back then, there was no call ID technology, and when our neighbor got word that a small kid had called, all fingers immediately pointed at me. I thank God that my dad wasn't home that night, or I would have lost 3 teeth a few years too early. Anyway, a young, sturdy-looking firefighter came and got me, brought me to one of the trucks and asked why I did this. I got a nice 30 minutes of scolding. He said next time, try ordering a long list of food from a restaurant and ask to deliver to her address instead. I did just that, and again, I was caught. And the 30 minutes of scolding became an hour this time. I guess he didn't think to tell me not to try the prank the same night right after the fire trucks left.